in a truly rural part of New Brunswick, attending St. Peter's and St. Paul's Church in Bartibog. We had the same pastor throughout most of those years. He kept refusing new appointments all the time while complaining constantly about the parish, and that was puzzling to me. He was a one-man operator, fully in charge of the parish and anything else he could insert himself into. I remember parish missions always preached in our parish by Redemptorists. All other surrounding parishes found the Redemptorists terrible with their shouting and their goings-on and their outbursts, but in Bartibog it was a nice mild change from our regular pastor. The Redemptorists spoke about the four last things always: death, judgment, heaven, and hell. And just about anybody who got up the nerve made a general confession. Always they had one session with the men and the women separate, and the children would go with the women. And I was more interested, of course, in what he would be saying to the men. So I asked someone who told me he had said nothing much except this joke, which I remember to this day, and I'll say it for you. A Redemptorist was preaching to men, and he asked them to raise their hands to indicate the following. How many have sexual relations with your wives about 4 or 5 times a week? And many hands went up. How many have sexual relations with your wives once or twice a week? And a few hands go up. How many have sexual relations with your wives only once a month? And one hand, a lone little old man down the back. And the Redemptorist looked at him and said, "That's strange, you look like a happy man. How come?" He said, "Well, tonight's the night." Of course, we had 40 hours annually. I loved the smell of the candles and the flickering of the flames, plus all the quiet. I can remember that, and the smell of incense and all those lovely things. And I'd go to confession every month. I usually tried to have at least 4 sins because I thought it wouldn't be worthwhile taking less. And I always felt good when it was over. I had a good, warm feeling when I came out of the confessional box. We had 30-day prayers. We had novenas, made the 9 first Fridays, the 5 first Saturdays. And the pastor that I had liked to speak about hell and damnation topics mostly for sermons. And he specialized in giving the last rites and giving eulogies at people's funerals. And his favorite quote was, "What doth it profit a man to gain the whole world and suffer the loss of his immortal soul?" And he had a light on the back of his car, the back window, which I didn't have in those days, I do now. And he would be able to put that on or off. He put it on when it was, he wanted the right of way, he was getting through to anoint somebody. And he had a sign about the sign of a size of a license plate, and it said clergy. In winter, the kids took a shortcut to church, going over a frozen river and up past the cemetery in Bartibog. And this was great until the pastor clinched it for me. He said one Sunday that the souls in the graveyard were shouting to us as we passed. And they would shout, "Today I die, tomorrow it's you." Oh, long, skinny fingers. He gave this out in Latin, and it sounded to me as a little girl something like "Hodie Mickey" or something like that anyway. Naturally, I heard the souls the very next time we took the shortcut. It was a strange thing how the others were so disappointed that they could hear nothing. And I never took the shortcut again. But I listened to those sermons, and they were sermons. And I made a direct application of everything to myself. Finally, one day, my mother said to me, "If the hat fits, you wear it, and if it doesn't, forget it." And I learned that as a great lesson in life, and I do it very well at the present time. And it served me well. It's a good lesson. We prayed in our family the rosary, and I knew that when I went to visit the neighbors, that if they were on their knees praying the rosary, that I was to get on my knees immediately and pray, no interruptions. I went to a public school, so my mother taught me butlers on Saturday, and I could quote you word for word, cover to cover, but I'm not so sure that I understood what the words meant, but that wasn't required. I recall at a very early age, when I was about 6, between 6 and 8, I think, enjoying time by myself, and I never felt alone. And I have never felt alone in my life. I have always felt that I am in the presence. And I can remember back as early as age 6 feeling that. My grandfather was a convert to Catholicism, and my grandmother, Isabelle, where I got my name, told me that my grandfather was a good man, and that he prayed, she said, first thing in the morning and last thing at night. And he lived to the ripe old age of 100, and he attributed that to the fact that he chewed goldenrod. I remember that he read the Catholic newspaper during the second homily, which would be in French, and they sat 5 pews from the front. Poor Graham. He'd open it right out and make a noise when they would read it. I think he would have given the core party his vote. He believed in going directly to the man above, no secondary route, he said, through the saints. And he didn't believe in religious life, and he was disappointed in my choice. He always quoted Genesis, be fruitful, multiply, and fill the earth. He was, as Graham said, though, a good man. Now, a final word about my old pastor, E.J. Connors. Many years later, when I was a sister, I was talking to him, and he said about the president of the parish council, who happened to be my cousin. He said to me, your cousin was trying to run this parish. And under my breath, I said, well, bully for her. Vatican II was not in vain. So now, that's enough of that. Moving right along, we're